So about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I noticed something felt weird up in my nostril. And so, I went in the mirror, pulled my nostrils open, looked up there, and what I saw was what I thought was a skin tag, which I don't even really know what that is, but it was like a little piece of skin I thought hanging off. So I took little scissors, shoved them up there, and cut that motherfucker off. Bad idea. It grew back like tenfold, and I was like, what the fuck? Do I have a wart in my nose or some shit? So I got wart remover, and I put that motherfucker up my nose, and that shit burnt. Don't ever do that. Don't ever put wart remover up your nose. So I just said fuck it and just left it, and it ended up getting so big you could not see it like this if you were looking at me, but if I went like this and pulled open my nose, it was plain as day, and it was totally blocking my whole left nasal passage. And I don't like doctors or anything, and so I just didn't worry about it, but it did block my breathing somewhat. So later on, I found out it was called the nasal polyp.
Polyps can grow large enough to block your nasal passages, resulting in chronic congestion. Symptoms can include 1. Nasal congestion, a sensation that your nose is blocked. 2. Runny nose. 3. Postnasal drip, which is when excess mucus runs down the back of your throat.
The best way I think I can get this across is by showing you guys things that stood out to me over the course of time that led me to be able to do this in the first place. The first one is probably Dr. Emoto and his frozen water experiments, which I learned about a few years back. This is when I first started going through the power of positive thoughts, which for me was probably one of my first steps in this awakening process. They would do experiments on water by freezing it with different intentions: love, thank you, and you can see the symmetry in the water crystals as they were frozen this way. It's all just beautiful patterns of sacred geometry when it comes from these intentions: happiness, love, gratitude, truth. There's a symmetry. Gratitude, it's almost perfect in every way. Water that's been blessed, given a blessing, peace. Everything is symmetrical in these. But then they did the opposite. You make me sick, I want to kill you. You can see how there's no form, it's just a mess. Demon. Ironically, it kind of looks like a snake at first glance to me. Anger. The absence of self. So it seems. And a couple of years ago, I myself started a garden, and I couldn't afford to start it all at once, so I started tomatoes and cucumbers first. Everything else came later. Well, the tomatoes and cucumbers, since they were first and I spent more time with them, I meditated with them, I played classical music, and I talked to them. And I cannot describe how much they would just produce. Tomatoes and cucumbers, there were so many. And these plants just kept growing and growing and growing. And the rest of the garden didn't work out at all. So I've pretty much proved that to myself. So at this point, I know what's in my nose is called a polyp. And then I see this about coral in the ocean.
A polyp is mostly stomach, with a mouth on top. It sits in a hard skeleton that's part of the reef.
These things led me to realize something that we already know. Everything is alive at some level, or at least conscious in some sense. So I lived with this thing for about 4 years, blocking my breathing and all that. Then I started meditating about 3 years ago, and then I found Dolores Cannon, my golden girl. She was like one of the golden girls to me, but she was a hypnotherapist that stumbled across similarities between people's subconscious during sessions, and she led me to the way of self-healing.
Then as I was working with it, I came into contact with what I call this great power that I work with. That's the one that gives me all the information that I write about. The ETs came in during that one time, but then this other one is the one I work with now.
I see.
I call it the subconscious, but it's not the subconscious the way it's defined by the psychiatrist. That's a childish part of your mind. Mm-hmm. This, you might say, is the oversoul, the higher self, the higher consciousness. It is so big and so huge, it has the answers to everything. Why not work with something like that? And I had to have a name for it, so I called it the subconscious. They say, we don't care what you call us, we'll work with you. And it's a beautiful, wonderful energy. So when I worked with them, I found they could not only answer any question that the client wanted answered, but they could also have instantaneous healing.
Okay.
Now, I'm not doing this. I'm the facilitator. But if I work with thousands of people and I can call it in to work with that person, it comes through that person exactly the same way every time. You know I found something. But it's miraculous. I have people now coming from all over the world to my little office in Huntsville, especially to have the healings. And we work with every kind of disease there is, every kind of illness. I have people coming who are scheduled for surgery. They don't have to have surgery. People are ready for liver transplants, kidney dialysis. They don't need it anymore because you make yourself sick. And if your mind is powerful enough to make yourself sick, it's also powerful enough to heal it.
So about a year after that, I was in meditation, and I was in that state, and in my mind, I was communicating with the nasal polyp, thinking about it being conscious, or every part of it, every cell of the polyp being conscious, and communicating with it and talking to it within my head. And I would say, with love, from a place of love completely, I love you, but you're kind of in our way. You're blocking the passage of our air, and we need that. It was like that, at least. It was with love and understanding and respect. And it might sound weird to some, but that's how I did it. The next day, I noticed it seemed a little smaller. Within a week, it was completely 100% gone within a week. So it doesn't happen overnight, but you got to start somewhere. If it's going to grow, it takes a little bit of time. If it's going to ungrow, it takes a little bit of time. Now, let's go back to the water crystals, where something is notable here. If you notice, the ones that are more symmetrical are the ones of love and gratitude, and the ones of disease and hate are the ones that are pretty much shapeless. They're just a mess. Now, if love and gratitude are forming the symmetry of these water crystals, well, we are one of the same, meaning we are symmetrical beings. And wherever you want to choose your starting point, there's no denying we are love. Fucking stoned.